Hey, my name is Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and today we're going to talk about two of my favorite things in life, rock and roll and horror movies. And we're going to talk about AC/DC and Mr. Stephen King. Well, the connection between the two, it's really interesting. Stephen King, besides being a horror fan, he's also a fan of rock and roll, hard rock, and heavy metal. He's a big fan of many bands, and one of his favorite bands is AC/DC. And back in 1986, after obviously many incredible movies which were released inspired by King's books, for example, The Shining, Carrie, Christine, and many other incredible movies which were released inspired by King's books, he had the chance to simply direct his first movie, which was inspired in one of his books. Actually was a short story called Trucks, and the movie it's called Maximum Overdrive, which had the actors Emilio Estevez, and it wasn't a very good movie, but it became a cult classic over the decades. I particularly don't think it's a bad movie. I mean, you can't compare, for example, The Shining, directed by Stanley Kubrick, with Maximum Overdrive. I mean, you can't expect that Stephen King, who is one of the greatest authors of all time, can be also one of the greatest directors of all time. So, anyway, he actually, being a great rock and roll fan, Stephen thought about the scenes in the movie with music. So he initially wrote sequences in the movie. Think about a kind of song he would use. And most of those songs were AC/DC songs. And so he approached the band, asking if he could use their music in the movie, and eventually also asked them if they were willing to write original music for the movie. And it was the first time that Stephen King ever directed a movie, and it also was the first time that AC/DC ever made music for a movie. They had never made music specially for a movie ever before. And they composed three tracks. At the time, they recorded those songs in the Bahamas at the famous studio in Nassau that many other famous bands recorded there. For example, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and many others. And at the time, the studio, the production of the movie sent a musical director to kind of give the band some directions, but obviously they didn't accept that. I mean, they already were one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time, and they they had the idea. Obviously, they knew what the movie was about. It was about machines coming to life and rebelling against humans. So they knew what the movie was about, and they wrote tracks thinking about that. And the result were three tracks. They were called BT and Chase the Ace, the first two ones, but the most famous one is Who May Who I think which is one of my favorite AC/DC tracks. I think it's extremely underrated. It's such a great track. It's such a great music video with those hundreds of Angus Youngs playing the guitar and everything synchronized. I think it's such a great music video as well. And obviously that became a hit for AC/DC at the time. Obviously not as big as Back in Black, Highway to Hell, but it was a hit at the time. And it was part of a compilation they released at the time as well, which was extremely successful too. And that was really interesting, but obviously by the end of the day, no one really loved the movie. But there's a really interesting interview that the guitarist Angus Young gave, and we transcribed that. He gave a really interesting interview. Another interesting thing is that initially Stephen King himself didn't like the track. He couldn't understand what AC/DC was trying to say on Who Made Who. But eventually he understood and he liked the track, and it was featured in the movie, obviously. And a really interesting thing that Angus Young said in an interview that we transcribed. He gave an interview that was made available by Scott Young on YouTube, and we transcribed that, and he said that not AC/DC didn't like the movie, and Stephen King himself didn't like the movie because he thought it wasn't as good as it could be, and he obviously didn't direct anything else in his life. That's his only movie, the only movie he directed. And you're gonna see here what Angus Young said about the meeting with Stephen King and about the movie. And another really interesting thing that Young says is that he had no idea that Stephen King was a huge fan of AC/DC, and he knew practically all the songs, even the deep cuts. Stephen King knew them, all the lyrics to the songs. And this is what Angus Young said. He said King came to a show after the movie was released. He sat down and had a beer with us, with everybody in the band. He said, well, the only thing that worked in that movie was the music. And obviously everybody laughed. The movie was crap. And he said, I will never direct any movie in my life. And he hasn't. But he's a nice guy. The thing that impressed me and Angus, it was actually Malcolm Young who gave this interview. I'm sorry. The thing that impressed me and Angus was that we've got this track, Ain't No Fun, Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire. And it's like 8.5 minutes. It's all just 8.5 minutes of verse lyrics, each one different from the other. He put that on, and he sat there miming the whole thing through. He's a big fan. It wasn't a commercial thing. There's probably 12 or 13 verses in that song, and he had all perfect. But at the end of the day, I've seen the movie again. It's not up there with the great movies, but for some of the crap that comes out these days, it's not too bad. And that's a very interesting thing to know, this meeting backstage between Stephen King and AC/DC at the time. And obviously the movie bombed at the box office. It costed about $9 million and made only more than $7 million. I mean, could have been worse, right? But on the other hand, Who Made Who, which was the soundtrack album of the movie, which had not only those 3 original songs but other classic songs by AC/DC which were used in the movie. That soundtrack album sold an estimated amount of more than 5 million copies. I mean, that's a lot. Of course, it's not up there with Back in Black or Highway to Hell or some other AC/DC albums, but it's quite a lot. Even for a soundtrack album, it's quite a lot. And, well, that's it. I hope you liked the video. I hope you enjoy it. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave your comment, and obviously visit rockandrollgarage.com. See you later.